to this Talks at Google virtual event. My name is Emily Ma, and I'm the head of Food for Good at Google, a team that organizes Google's contribution to solving for food insecurity and food waste. Before we get started, though, I want to remind the audience that we will be taking questions towards the end of this talk. As you think of questions throughout this conversation, please feel free to add them to the chat on the right. With that, I am so excited today to introduce today's guest, Dr. Lonnie Johnson. Dr. Johnson is an engineer and Inventor Hall of Fame inductee. He is the founder and president of Johnson Research and Development and the founder and president of the Johnson STEM Activity Center, a 501c3 dedicated to educating disadvantaged and underserved children in STEM. A prolific inventor with over 150 patents, he is best known for his most popular invention, which makes me so happy, the Super Soaker. Dr. Johnson also has multiple degrees in engineering from Tuskegee University, including 2 honorary doctorates. He served as the U.S. Air Force, in the U.S. Air Force, where he analyzed space systems and worked on the stealth bomber program, earning the Air Force Achievement Medal and the Air Force Commendation Medal, not once, but twice. At NASA's JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, he helped develop some of the nation's most advanced technologies in the Galileo mission to Jupiter, the Mars Observer, and the Cassini Mission to Saturn, earning multiple awards for his contributions. Lonnie, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Talks at Google. I am so excited to dig in with you.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm excited to be here.
So first things first, I know we all have our stories of childhood. You know, when I was a child, I used to tinker. I used to set things on fire. My parents didn't like that. I crashed rockets on the ground, all that good stuff, right? I'm sure you had quite a few stories of your own, and I wanted to hear a little bit about what your childhood was like and what made you who the person you are today.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in tinkering and inventing, and I grew up in the 60s, in the heart of the civil rights movement. In the late 50s is when the civil rights movement formally got going. But the other thing that was traumatic, George Wallace, Governor Wallace, had stood in the door of the University of Alabama saying no Black students would ever attend, and Martin Luther King was assassinated my senior year in high school. That was in '68. Robert Kennedy, when he had won the California primary for president for the Democratic Party, he was assassinated. Malcolm X was assassinated, who was one of our leading civil rights leaders. And of course, President Kennedy, just a year after he had made the moon speech, he was assassinated. So these kind of things were going on. Fortunately, my parents were very supportive of my interests. I was always tinkering and working on things when I was a kid. One of the things I did was, when President Kennedy made his moon speech, I got excited about rockets and started experimenting with rockets. And one of the things that happened, I went to the library and I learned to mix rocket fuel. I got this recipe and it was really cool, and I got really good at it. At first, it was just mixing the powders together and using them as dry powders. But the real recipe required heating the mixture, warming it up, and it would actually turn into a syrup that I could pour into the body of the rocket, and then it would solidify. So I had a real solid rocket propellant. Well, I was mixing this fuel one day in the kitchen on the stove, and everything was going great until it overheated just a little bit, and then there was a small spark. Next thing I knew, and I knew there was no way to stop it, the whole pot of solid rocket propellant started burning, and flames and smokes were shooting up out of the pot in my mother's kitchen. And of course, the only thing I could do was step back away from it. And the smoke was so thick, I couldn't see my hands in front of my face. And of course, it was a really scary situation. Eventually, the smoke cleared. There was a few small holes burnt in the kitchen chairs, but otherwise the kitchen didn't catch fire. But I knew I was in trouble. And I was waiting for my dad to get home. So I put on 2 pair of pants.
Smart man.
So when he got home there, I was all humble and meek, of course. And he looked at me and he looked around at what had happened, and he says, "You're going to have to do that outside from now on." And he bought me a hot plate, and I continued to mix hot rocket fuel. So fortunately, I had parents who didn't stymie my imagination, and I was able to continue to pursue my interest, and they nurtured that. And fortunately for me, I didn't end up in trouble, in trouble that I could not recover from. Let me say it that way.
That is so lovely, so lovely. And then you ended up being in the early days of robots too, right?
Yeah, well, I mentioned the assassination and all of the things that were going on, and everybody's aware of Martin Luther King and his nonviolent movement. But there was a flip side to the civil rights movement, where blacks were protesting, and it was a lot of anger, especially killing off our leadership, and you can imagine what the environment was like. And so the National Guard was in the street here in the U.S. Literally thousands of fires burning across the country, where there were riots and protests, and it was really just a dramatic scene. The things that were happening. So these are the kind of things that were going on outside of my family and outside of my home life. But fortunately, I was able to continue to tinker. By the time I got to high school, I was really focused more on technology, and I started working on this, my robot. I used to watch these robots on TV, and nobody told me that they had people inside. So I didn't know any better than to try building a robot, right? So this was Lonx. And I mentioned earlier about Governor Wallace having stood in the door at the University of Alabama saying no black students would ever attend that university. Well, Lonx, my school, sent me to the science fair there at the University of Alabama. It was a junior engineer technical society. And of course, I was the president of my chapter of the Junior Engineering Technical Society at my high school. So this was a really big deal. It's the only black student there representing, participating rather in that competition. And my robot was my science project. It took me over a year to build him. What looks like eyes is actually a real tape recorder. That digital technology didn't exist back then, so I could transmit signals to him and turn the tape recorder on and record the signals and then play them back. And that was my way of programming him. He was fully remote controlled, and his arms could articulate just about any way a human could. But Lonx won first place at the University of Alabama in 1968, which was a huge moral victory for me personally.
I have to ask, so is it a bipedal robot, or is it a quadruped you got going on there, or is it on wheels?
It's on wheels. It's on wheels. That would have been a little bit much.
I only bring this up because when I was in college, I ended up studying bipedal robots and cockroach robots, and that was my first robot was a cockroach robot with 6 legs. So robots are no small feat, and wheels are still hard. Wheels are still very hard too, getting over obstacles and things.
Well, he could swivel on his base and turn in different directions, so he was okay.
He was mobile. He knew how to get around, pick things up. So that's all good. Well, I know that you went from robots to something very interesting a little later on in life. And, I've been waiting in anticipation for weeks now to ask you this question, because I am the proud owner of not one, but 2 Super Soaker Monster XLs. Yes. My parents still have them in their house, and they told me about it again this weekend. I would love to hear a little bit more about how you came to invent this beloved toy for so many of us growing up in the last 30 years. Can you tell us about that journey?
Well, it actually goes back to the robot, because one of the challenges for my robot was power, energy. And so I've had this long-term interest in energy technology. And so I was literally working on a new type of heat pump that would use water as a working fluid instead of Freon, because Freon was bad for the environment. And so I was going to invent this new environmentally friendly air conditioning system. So I machined these nozzles, and I built some of the components, and I had these nozzles hooked up to the bathroom sink. And this was when I would go home and tinker, because at the time I was actually at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory working on the Galileo project as a systems engineer, helping design that spacecraft. So I would go home and tinker and work on my own ideas and own projects. And so I had these nozzles hooked up to the bathroom sink, and I turned and shot a stream of water across the bathroom, and it was so satisfying. I thought, I should put some of these hard science things aside, because I was having trouble convincing people that I had great ideas for inventions, but I couldn't get anybody to invest in my ideas. So I decided to develop a toy. I thought, anybody could look at a toy and appreciate it. And I thought I'd get enough money to support myself, then I could pursue my other ideas. I knew Super Soaker would do well, but I had no idea that it would become a huge success that it was.
How did you find your way to people who helped you take the concept that you had in the bathroom, right? And turn it into something that was manufactured in millions? How many Super Soakers are out there?
Oh, geez, millions, literally.
Millions.
Well, first off, I'm an engineer, nuclear engineer. So after I realized that, okay, I want to have a high performance toy gun, water gun. So I started building a model. So my whole concept was that, it's one thing to, do some arm waving and say, I've got this great idea to do X, Y, Z, but that was the problem I was having in getting people to really understand what I was talking about and appreciate it. So my strategy was to build a water gun and then be able to demonstrate how it would perform. So I started literally machining all the parts. I had a little Unimat lathe that in my shop that I made all the components, and it took me a few weeks, but then when I got them all made, all the components made, I glued them all together. And the idea was to, okay, I want high pressure, but I want a small kit to be able to operate it. So I use a small diameter pump, applying, it's just engineering principles, large flow cross sections, so I minimize head loss, comfortable water flowing through the gun, just putting all those design features in. And so after making all the parts and putting them together, this is the first time I get to see, okay, what does it really do? I had all the ideas and put all these neat features in to get high performance. And so let's see what the real performance is going to be. So it was very, very satisfying to see it shoot for the first time. It did not disappoint me.
Oh my goodness. And when you showed others, they must have been like,
this. Yeah. Now, that was when I got the first working model of the gun. It took literally 10 years and a lot of false starts.
Really?
Yeah. One company I was working with, they went out of business, went bankrupt. At one point, I wanted to manufacture guns and go into the toy business because I thought it was a great idea and I could just sell a whole bunch of them. But at that time, I'd gone back on active duty in the Air Force, and I got a manufacturing company to give me some cost estimates. And they said, okay, it's going to cost $200,000 to get the first 1,000 guns off the manufacturing line. I'm like, I don't have $200,000. Back then, this is in the 90s, which it's a lot more money than it is now. And so I said, okay, well, there's some things I clearly don't understand about business. I worked on government projects and so forth. So that's when I got the idea to license. Another company I was working with, they got excited about it and took it to Hong Kong to get it into production, but they never got it out of their model shop. They took the gun apart and said, okay, we can't figure out what was what. And I had to build another model and ship it back to them. And just again, a false start. Another company that I was working with, I actually did get one toy on the market. It was an airplane called Jamming Jet. That was the first toy that actually made it to the market. When I used to shoot the Super Soaker, I could feel it kicking, right? It had a recoil. I said, geez, I could have a continuous. So I actually made a toy airplane that I put a water bottle in and pressurized it and launch it, and the water would shoot out the back and propel the airplane into flight. And so that was called Jamming Jet. Some people may have seen it. But it flew so well that the toy company said, we don't want kids to lose the airplane, so they would put their tail at a rudder, so the rudder at an angle rather, so that it would fly in a circle. And I'm like, don't do it that way. And nobody would listen to me, right? So sure enough, they manufactured, I think, 60,000 airplanes or something like that. They put about $1 million in the TV advertising and big launch and everything, big show and toy fair. And all of them had this feature where the airplane would fly in a circle, right? Well, basic aerodynamics, airplanes get their lift from the wings moving through the air, right? And if you're turning, one wing's going to get a little bit more lift than the other because and so you end up rolling and diving right into the ground. All of them manufactured broke. They never got the water gun out of their model shop. And so I got rights back, and by now it's, over 7 years later. I went to Toy Fair in New York, and literally with the idea of just walking the halls and meeting people and finding some toy company that would be interested. So that's when I met the people at Laramie, and the rest is history.
Oh my God, what a story. Everything that you've talked about has really sort of brought me back to two things. You're infinitely curious, and you really approach this as play. And, even as you sort of run into obstacles with one model shop or one company, or, trying this out, trying that out, even after you said it took you 10 years to make, super.
Well, it was 10
right?
years from the idea to the #1 selling toy in the world.
Right. And so, I'm curious, like, you're still, you are, you're an elder at this point, and you've been at this for so long. Do you still play? Are you still curious? Is this
yeah, I'm very curious, and I'm very, my hobby became my job, and, I literally I have a team of scientists and engineers that work with me now, and it's really gratifying and self-fulfilling, literally, to have some harebrained idea, and I've got someone on staff I can go bounce it off of and really have a serious conversation about it. So right at this point, there are 2 companies that we've spun out of my research laboratory. JTech Energy, which is a new type of heat engine that converts heat directly into electricity, more efficient than existing engines, and and it'll be useful for everything to power plants to large scale power plants, all the way down to even operating on body heat to generate power. It's an engine that has no moving mechanical parts.
Wow. We're going to have to get into this a little later, because I think one of the biggest challenges of our times is just generating enough electricity. Energy.
I'm still focused on the environment. That was what I was doing back when I was working on the Super Soaker. JTech has a long history as well. I presented it to the Office of Naval Research at one point, and I'm up there talking about this engine, and again, I'm arm waving, right? This is how it's going to work, and this is what it'll do, and so forth. And someone stood up and, "How dare you come in and claiming you could do such a thing? This won't work." And go look at the Austrian report. Stormed out. Of course, I'm standing there in front of a whole room full of people with my PowerPoint and getting literally humiliated and kicked out. I'm getting on the plane, coming back home, thinking, how could I miss that? How could I have done it? And I got back and I looked up the Austrian report, and I started going through it. It was all about the thermal regenerative fuel cells, and my invention was not in there. So this guy was wrong. And so eventually JTech was anointed by popular mechanics as one of the top 10 world-changing inventions. And we've now spun out a company that it looks like the primary use for it will be low-grade waste heat, which is something addressing a need that other technologies have not been able to address. So it's going to not only fill a void, but also will really change the game, is what we're anticipating.
Dr. Johnson, I'm so excited to hear more about that in a bit, because I feel like heat, well, I know from thermodynamics classes that heat is the lowest form of energy that we have. And if we can bring it back to a higher form of energy, we can use it again through that process. And so the invention, you're so prolific with 150 patents and more coming. I wanted to just pivot for a moment, though. You are not only in the business of building businesses and really changing the world, you're also in the business of creating more Lonnies. Right, you have. I'm serious, right? Your work.
I've never heard it put that way.
We need more Lonnies. If everybody could find their Lonnie inside them, even 1% of the Lonnie inside them, we've changed the world. You've been so involved in US First, and this is the other reason why I was so excited to talk to you today. I actually went into my archives, and you might recognize this signature. So I was in my early 20s. This is Dean Kamen. And I coached a robotics team. Robotics is team go team 1700. You're still around, almost 20 years in. All girls, right? And I had recognized that actually when I was 19. This is my first team. This is St. George's Wise, Canada First, 1999. It made a huge difference in my confidence going to college and studying engineering and building things in the machine shop. But I wanted to give back afterwards to all these young women who, didn't know how to, use a lathe or a mill, or didn't know necessarily how to take ideas that they had on a page to turn it into a prototype and test it out. You've done something phenomenal, Lonnie, and I want the world to hear this. You have managed to 10x the national average of underrepresented groups in STEM in Georgia through the work that you've done with the youth there. And I want the world to hear about how you've managed to do that and how the rest of us can follow your lead and what can we learn so that that can happen everywhere. Because I see young women, young folks who are, of a ethnicity that is not necessarily always represented, like those teams those folks don't have the same opportunity. So what do we do to increase the participation? What can we all do?
Well, first, I think it's a phenomenal program. I mean, it's just awesome in terms of an organization that it's an engineering program that builds people, which is really, really cool. But it builds self-esteem and self-awareness. When I was a kid growing up, and I would be in class and I get a grade and the teacher was not fair, and I'd go home and complain, and my mom would say, look, the grade is not what counts. What counts is what you put in your brain, and what's in your brain and what you learn, nobody can take that away from you but God. And so, when I learned, in fact, someone from First approached me, Patty Cook, back in the early 2000 timeframe, and she came to my office and started describing this grade school robotics program. And as soon as she mentioned that, I said, oh, I'm in. So she didn't know about my experience with my robot in high school. So when I realized what she was talking about, and she kept trying, coaching me and trying to explain what it was all, I said, no, you don't get it. I'm in. So what I did was I, got with the 100 Black Men of Atlanta, which is a mentoring organization, with the idea of going into the inner city and actually introducing this program to students who otherwise would not participate. Right. They contracted with another company, Bart Suderith, Millennium, and we set up the program. I provide the space here. I'm on the board of directors for Georgia First. We have a full regulation field here at my facility. And we've literally gone all over the state, going into the inner cities, introducing kids to this program. And, the two things I think that are key: one, having someone who is, devoted to the program and who makes it their mission to make it successful. So this is a paid staffer. The other one is that when we go into these environments to introduce the program, we bring our teams and our kids, and these are kids talking to kids. And when they see kids who look like them doing it, well, all of those apprehensions start to dissipate, especially when they see them having fun doing it. So it's been very effective. Fortunately, we've had the resources and we built the infrastructure to make it all happen. We touch about, in our facility here, just bringing in kids and having events and so forth over the course of the year, we touch about 10,000 kids. Wow. At this point, the national average of students involved in FIRST is about 4%. Here in Georgia, it's about 30%. Gosh. The challenge that we have is as the kids get older, we start with the Legos, of course, where the barriers are not as challenging. But there's not a lot of, I want to say, wealth, financial resources within our community. So as the kids get older and we get into the bigger robots, obviously that becomes more challenging. And we're working on figuring out how to address that need. Yeah, we've been very successful.
Lonnie, I also went into my archives, and I don't know if this is going to show, but these are some of the photos of when we were able to invite some of the kids into our machine shop, like you have invited them into your facility to build. And, we had to cordon off hours for our staff to not be in there because we'd be welding and doing some stuff.
One of the things I did was the initial laboratory robotics lab that I set up for the kids, I put a window in the wall So that when the kids are working on their robots, they could look into my laboratory and see real scientists working on the research that we're doing. So, and these guys would be, of course, in their lab coats and the whole 9 yards doing real technology development. We've got glove boxes. I mean, my lab is pretty elaborate. And so it was really, we hit them with a double whammy, if you will. But the real important thing, as you pointed out, it's one thing to tell someone what they can do and try to inspire them and encourage them to do something. It's totally different when you have them experience success. Because once they have that experience, they own it, and it's really, you can't really take that away from them.
It's so interesting, the parallels to prototyping, right? You and I chatted about, we have an idea in our head, but I think your note was, Mother Nature has her own ideas. So right? we can draw or we can think about it, but it's really important to go build the prototype and then to try it out for size, right?
Yeah, I mean, Super Stroke is a perfect example. I had all these ideas and concepts, and I applied all the engineering principles to build a gun. But it wasn't until I pumped it up and shot it the first time that I really knew what it was going to do.
Oh, so good. Well, I have a question for you then. You mentioned it's some reasonably straightforward in the early years with Lego. So I'm familiar with that primary school program. And then I think they move up to the middle school and they have a slightly bigger kit. But at the high school level and older, building real robots requires access to a slightly different set of resources, and a machine shop does help, right? And I mean, US First, you're building 100-pound robot. There's a lot going on. Sometimes there's pneumatics, there's general motors and stuff. What advice do you have for those of us who are mentoring? Like, how can we make these resources more available, or what would your team need to continue scaling your work in Georgia?
Well, at this point, I've set up a nonprofit. Up until now, actually, I've been financing everything personally. I have about 20,000 square feet that I've allocated to the program here. And we have 8 FRC teams, which is the high school size robots here on site. And then, of course, they have smaller teams, subcategories where they break up and they also mentor younger kids. We have a summer program where we have summer camps and other workshops and things like that. So we maintain a pretty active program over the course of the year. So basically, and of course, being on the board of directors of Georgia First, I get to have some influence and some input in terms of the statewide strategy and so forth. So fortunately, we put a regulation field here in our facility so kids can come in and actually practice and get ready for competition. So we hold independent scrimmages in the whole 9 yards, prior to the real competition, just to help the kids get comfortable and debug their robots and so forth. So it really does come down to resources. And the teams that build here are teams that it's a combination of things. Some of them don't, they're homeschool kids. They're kids who want to be on a team, but there's no team at their high school, so they come here. And we open our doors to everyone. So we're all about inspiring kids and getting them interested in technology and science and building self-confidence. Some of them are teams that are representing a school, but they don't have space at their school for the robot, and to have a pit or a place to do the build and so forth, and don't have a machine shop, so they can come here. So we provide a full machine shop. We have actually 2 machine shops on site. One for my laboratory, and the kids can come over and use it if their machine shop doesn't have what they need. We have programmable routers and things like that can actually do it. And we have a HOS, which is a programmable milling machine.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got a full, pretty broad capability. But
I'm jealous. I'm jealous.
But more than anything, we have people who work with the kids and who believe in them. One of the things that we, in our latest strategy, we've decided to start. The biggest challenge with the program is mentors and coaches. So we're going to start a coach development program where we're going to actually start recruiting people and getting people interested. So that's going to be an active part of our strategy going forward, to actually build a coaching resource, if you will, and have people that can really are prepared to mentor and lead teams. Part of the problem, of course, is that people, even adults have the same problem that kids have. They look at the program and say, "Oh wow, that's overwhelming. There's technology, there's science. I can't." Well, coaches have this. We tell someone, "I'm not an engineer. I can't coach." Well, we have to get people past that because you really don't have to be an engineer to coach a team or lead a team. The program is really neat that way.
That was exactly the question I was going to ask you. Along the way, the 5 years that I coached Gate Robotics, there were so many incredible parents of children who didn't have technical backgrounds but wanted to help, and they were so kind. So many of them were, helping us do driving, helping us review business plans, helping us fundraise, and even just getting food for the team, during those final weeks where everybody's trying to get everything working, right? I love the program because it involved so many people, and it requires such a diverse set of skills to put a robot on the field. And Lonnie, it feels like one of those moments on the field, right? When, oh my God, why is our motor on fire? What just happened? We're going to pull aside, do some quick adjustments, play the next game, right? And I was, I think we were talking about resources and the regulation field that you have. I'm so jealous, by the way, just having that space to practice and makes such a big difference to be ready to go with your alliances when the game starts. And so anyways, we were chatting about resources.
You can always come to Georgia.
I need to come. That's where they have the national championship every year, or that's where they used to have it in the convention.
Used to have it here, yeah. In fact, when I first got involved, the championship was here, and
that's right.
Our leadership at the time didn't realize it. We tried to get it back, realizing what we lost, but unfortunately, we have not been able to. There's so much that goes on in Atlanta now. The challenge is just getting into the venues that would be large enough to host it. But I think that eventually we'll get the championship.
I hope so. Where it should be. That's actually where I first experienced the national championship. Was Gate Robotics was Rookie of the Year in 2004 or 5. I don't remember what year it was now. But that I visited. It was still in Georgia at that point, and it was so neat to see 400 teams from all over the world there, and met a lot of people and learned a lot of new ways of doing things. And it's so nice to, you mentioned earlier, just seeing other people like yourself, right? Also.
Oh, yeah. I mean, being, it's like just being in your element.
Yeah.
Being around like-minded people is really a cool thing.
Lonnie, I wanted to maybe close out with one final question, and then I know lots of people are waiting in the audience to ask you a few questions, so I wanted to give them the floor. The next decade, I kind of look back to the beginning of your conversation with the photos of cities being on fire. And then I look outside, right? I live in California, and there's a big fire happening right now in Yosemite. And, we have our version of, the challenges we face in this decade and this century, whether it's the environment, whether it's, economics, whether it's politics, whether it's, whatever it might be. Maybe you could share some advice with the audience here. What can this generation do?
I was just thinking about that. The fact that right now it's the closest thing we've had to the 60s since the 60s.
That's right.
There's just a lot of challenges. Back then, of course, we had the race to the moon.
Yeah.
War in Vietnam and war protest all over the country. People, literally, more than one person in protest on the U.S. Capitol steps, literally doused themselves with gasoline and set themselves on fire, just to make the point that they were against the war, and they were not against the war because they were cowards. They were against the war because it was wrong. So there was a strong moral fiber and value that was just more pervasive back then, I think. And a lot of people were doing a lot of soul searching. And of course, the civil rights movement and all of the things that were happening back then was causing a lot of that soul searching. So it was a really, really traumatic time, I think, in our history. And then, of course, today, I was just thinking about the picture you had up earlier about when Martin Luther King had the March on Washington and all the people that came. If they had done what Donald Trump did, the civil rights movement, I sometimes think about what would have happened if Martin Luther King had not been on the scene, and if we could have been plunged into a long-term ethnic war conflict like what we see in the Middle East. Martin Luther King was able to get people to be more rational and see things in a logical and see fellow human beings instead of the other. And that was very profound, because I think a lot of parts of the world would meet someone like that who can get people to really be more objective about their own ideas and be more open-minded to people who look different. And so we could have very easily have plunged into a civil and cultural conflict, because there were a lot of angry people, a lot of Black people angry, a lot of white people angry, and a lot of people were scared on both sides, and people were, militants would be in the Black community were being hailed as heroes, and it was just, it was a very different time. So now today we've got several whammies facing us. I think the biggest is the environment. I think that the cultural issues and the political issues that we're facing right now, I think America's seen tough times in the past, and I think we'll work through those things. And fortunately, the coup attempt that we just went through failed. And I think that as more people get the facts about what happened and put things into perspective, they'll realize that, the election was not stolen after all, and this guy was just dishonest. In any case, this will pass. I think the truth will come out. People will realize that, America remains strong at its core. The environment, though, I think about Cosmos, the original Cosmos series that Carl Sagan did. And he, in one of his episodes, he talked about the dinosaurs and all, and he says, I wonder when the dinosaurs looked up and saw the sky turning dark and gray, I wonder if they understood what was happening to them. And so we're in the same situation now. The polar ice caps are melting. We're having all this crazy weather and stuff. And people have been predicting it. Scientists have been talking about this coming for a long time. But nobody, it seems like the politicians have just missed the boat in terms of reacting. This goes all the way back to the 70s when people started really pushing to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. But somehow, the can just kept getting kicked down the road, so to speak. There's a chart that, there's a graph that goes back, I think, 400,000 years. There are three lines on this chart. The blue line is the ocean level, the red line is the temperature of the Earth, and the black line is the level of CO2 in the atmosphere. And this was actually presented on a NOVA program. Polar Extremes, I think, was the title of that program for those who are interested in learning more about it. But you can see those three properties or tracked each other very closely over the millennia. But fast forward to present day, all the way to the right of the chart, you can see the temperature of the Earth is the 14.55 is shown there with the little flag. But the CO2 level is way up top off the chart. That's the C377 point. So we're in no man's land at this point, unknown territory, and how that CO2 level will eventually impact sea level and earth temperature really remains to be seen, because they have, once they sync up, it's going to take a minute. I'm saying a minute. It's going to take a while. So we may not have seen the worst. And, and I think of the global system large, it's like turning a ship. We bring the CO2 level down, but once we do that, that doesn't mean that the impact goes away immediately. It's going to take a while for the ecosystem to transition back to a more normal state. So I think we are facing some challenges, and I think that having our youth prepared to deal with the environment, and I think that's very, very important. That's one of the things one of the reasons why I focus on what I'm doing, but I also do it because it's very, very fulfilling to see a child get excited about life and have visions about having an impact and growing and becoming a productive person. It's just inspiring to see that.
Dr. Johnson, I feel like sometimes the problem seems so overwhelming that it's hard to engage. And yet we all have that creativity in ourselves to be able to participate and to do our part. And like you, I feel the same way as I've coached and mentored over the years. It's wonderful to know that it takes effort and it takes time to help individuals understand that they can participate. But then, I was looking through my photos here. These young women have gone on to be satellite engineers, electrical engineers, rocket scientists, and we have to do that part, with the future generations. And I'm not going to go ahead.
You have to have great aspirations. I think people wonder and talk about artificial intelligence and where we're going with all of that. It's like, it's almost inevitable. Well, I guess I won't say almost, it's inevitable that mankind will push technology, because that's what we're built to do. We're problem solvers, and we're pretty good at it. So we will push technology, and the challenge, of course, is to make sure that we push it in a moral way. And I think that's why having moral leadership is important, because there are so many things that, as we become more and more powerful in our knowledge and our ability to impact the world, each other, our environment, and our future, and even impact our survivability, we've got to make good choices, we've got to make good decisions. And so having a moral compass is extremely important.
I love that as a sort of wrap-up point from you, as a sort of something for us all to remember. And I also know there's lots of people wanting to ask us questions, so maybe we could queue up the first one and see how many we can get through in the next few minutes. Oh, first question from Randall. How do you spell the name of your robot that you built?
It's Lonx, L-I-N-E-X.
Oh, very good.
My alter ego.
Why did you name him Linux? What is his?
Well, it's my alter ego. I named him after myself. Instead of Bonnie, it's Lonx.
So good.
I was a kid,
That's right. Next question. From Heather, when will they bring back the Super Soaker? I can't believe it's on stores anymore. I can't believe that either. But are they ever going to bring it back?
Well, actually, they are back. They're in stores. Well, I mean, toy stores. When are they going to bring back toy stores?
I know. They were so fun.
Super Soakers are still being sold. But, the question is, when are they going to bring back the high-performance Super Soakers? I just had a friend who bought a couple of guns online in eBay. Paid a few $100s for them, got them. They don't work, but they were the older venue where they were large guns that shot a lot of water, performed much better than what's on the market today. and and they didn't work. So I have literally repaired them for him personally, and actually souped one of them up. So it actually pumps goes to a little bit higher pressure and a little bit more powerful nozzle.
Dr. Johnson, I'm going to bring you my 2 Super Soaker XLs then. We made. I'm going to have to, find a way to check them in because they're not carry-on.
That's right.
All right, next question from Jill. Your work in reaching Atlanta youth through FIRST Robotics is so impactful. Any lessons that can be leveraged elsewhere?
It does take commitment and dedication. This is something that we've been trying to leverage at actually other places. We have hosted conferences here with other chapters of the 100 Black Men of Atlanta. We have worked with the Boys and Girls Club of America to help get robotics programs into the clubs. In fact, I think the Boys and Girls Club actually have an official MOU with US First. So there are a number of things that we've done. I think the seminars are probably most important, and we do run into what we were talking about earlier about, we get people in and we start talking about setting up teams and coaching teams, and they really trying to get them to understand it is something that they can do. It's just a matter of getting them, making the commitment. It's a bit of a hurdle. But it's just like anything else. It takes focus, commitment, and determination, perseverance, and all of those things that are required in any endeavor to be successful.
It sounds like we have 2 final comments, and so I'm going to ask our team here to post those 2 comments, and I'll read them. Jesse says, just rocket science applied to kids' water guns. Yes, I agree. So good. And then the final comment is from Bob, who says, you helped save my sanity during COVID. I obtained a 3D printer just before lockdown. Since then, I had a bunch of time. I made my own foam dart launcher.
That's a good point. Most people don't know that, and a lot of your viewers, team members at Google may have played with the N-Strike line of Nerf dart guns. That line was based on my patents, and at one point, so when Super Soaker became successful, Nerf dart guns were on the market. I said, I want to be the king of all toy guns, right? So I started inventing Nerf dart guns, and I invented a whole line of guns, large and small, and they all worked better than what Hasbro had on the market at that time. So when I went and presented it to them, I think the reason they entered a deal with me, because they already had market share, they had control of the market, Nerf was their thing. I think they didn't want me to take that line to one of their competitors.
No.
So they entered a licensing deal.
Wow.
And they would put product out periodically, but the guns worked so well. Eventually, they launched N-Strike, and it became hugely successful. And I was indeed at that point the king of all toy guns. Probably made more money on dart guns than I did the Super Soaker, believe it or not.
Oh my goodness. Well, Lonnie, we're at time, sadly for me. I hope one day I get to visit you. I know you have an entire wall of Super Soakers right behind you. It's been such a pleasure meeting you, learning from you, and you're so full of joy and curiosity, and I will take that with me, and all of us at Google will take that with us for a very long time.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I've enjoyed this very much.